talk to me so you can see what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. Hey, you guys, welcome back to this month's What's Going On Wednesday. And in this section, we're going to be talking about taking care of business. This is our Taking Care of Business Spotlight. And today I am blessed to have my friend on the line with me. Her name is Lydia O. And Lydia, for those of you who don't know, is the founder and president of one of the largest natural hairs, or actually, she doesn't say that. She says one of the most influential natural hair groups here in the U.S., which is the LA Curly Girls, and we all affectionately call her Madam President. But today, we're not going to be talking about LA Curly Girls. We're not going to be talking about any of that. Lydia is going to be talking about something that is much needed in our community and something that she does as her profession, and that is the business of lactation specialist. So, Lydia, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing great over here. You know, you and I talk a lot in the background, and we talk about all sorts of things. But I think that what you do is really phenomenal, and I think that a lot of people in our community aren't really aware of what you do and how important it is to the community. So I just wanted to spotlight you today and allow you to share with everyone what it is exactly that you do. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on who you are and what you do?
Again, my name is Lydia Boyd. I, for this business, I'm known as Lydia O. Boyd, a lactation specialist, and currently I'm a certified lactation educator, and I am working on my next certification, which is to be International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. I provide families with education and support prenatally and postpartum, so they can meet their breastfeeding goals. And so since breastfeeding isn't something that is very common, we don't talk about it, it's not something that we teach, in that fifth grade sex education class, a lot of people don't understand why I am needed. And we have the misconception like, oh, it's just easy, you put the baby to the breast and we'll be fine. But there's a lot that goes into breastfeeding. So prenatally, what I do is educate families about breastfeeding. So that's stuff that wasn't covered in that fifth grade class. Talk about that. We talk about things that usually knock families out of the breastfeeding game within the first 2 weeks. And then once I get to mom postpartum, then I help her to manage her breastfeeding. One of the main things that we hear about is pain. So I help with pain management. I help with positioning. I guide mom and the family through each of the baby's developmental feeding goals and their milestones, and just making sure that the baby is meeting getting their needs met from mom's milk. And so there's a whole gamut of things that we do.
So I'm going to take it back a little bit, Lydia. Thank you for that. You know, in our society today, everybody's go, 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 and everybody's, trying to be the next star, be the super professional, trying to be even super mom and do a million things at one time. And breastfeeding hasn't really been the go-to. Can you explain to our viewers why breastfeeding is important and why it's needed in our community?
One of the reasons that breastfeeding is so important, and one of the reasons why I have a focus on African American families who are descendants of U.S. slavery, is because we've lost the connection, our cultural and family traditions of breastfeeding. Our ancestors breastfed. It wasn't anything major. It was just something that we did. It was basic. It was like changing a diaper. That's just what we did. You have a baby, you change a diaper, you give the baby a bath, and then you breastfeed. Mm-hmm. But since our time here, that has been broken. It has been demonized and pathologized, and we've lost the art, we've lost the honor. We no longer see it as something that's handed down, honored tradition from generation to generation. That's the first thing for us. Overall, for the U.S., what we don't see is the separation from it being about big business. And so because there's such an issue with big business in not only breastfeeding and lactation, but just overall parenting across the board, um, it's been tainted. It's become something that is used for money making. And so then when you look at things like the formula companies and things like that, and those people who don't understand, when we make statements like that, they think that we're kind of demonizing a mom or a family who's made the decision to give formula, and that's not the case. Every parent has a right to make their feeding decision, however best meets their family's goals. However, where the problem comes in is that many families aren't being provided support um, to breastfeed, but they're actually being pushed and manipulated into giving formula. Um, so then when you look at for African Americans here in this country, the marketing is one that plays on our history, and then it plays on our insecurities. It plays on our distrust of the medical field, and there's a lot that goes into it. And that's one of the reasons why having culturally congruent and competent and sensitive lactation professionals for us is very, very much needed and important.
So when you say culturally congruent, can you explain what that is?
Culturally congruent is more about giving us what we need, what we know that we need. So we may not always be able to verbalize that, but throughout studies and several focus groups, what we've said is that we want images that look like us, because when you think of breastfeeding, the average image that you see is this white woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, and she looks perfect, and everything about her and her baby is perfect. But we don't see that for us. So those aren't the images that we get. So it's not odd that many of our elders say, that's not for us. That's not something that we do. Breastfeeding is just something that we don't do because we don't see ourselves doing it. So then what we do is, if we can get breastfeeding support, usually because breastfeeding is, lactation is very, very white, it's really hard to find somebody who looks like you and understands you as a Black woman, as a member of a Black family with Black elders and things like that. So they're not really familiar with our traditions, why we do certain things, why we say certain things, that kind of thing. So when we look at being culturally congruent, we want to be able to give us what we need to make it our own.
Okay. Now, as far as breastfeeding benefits, what are some of the benefits that both the child and the mother, so this is a two-parter, the child and the mother can receive from participating in breastfeeding?
Well, there's numerous health, just directly straight out the gate, health benefits. Breastfeeding reduces the risk of reproductive cancers for moms, so that's cervical, breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical uterine, and then we go into, usually moms who breastfeed for a certain amount of time, they have less chances or less incidences of osteoporosis. They usually have healthier heart, so heart disease may be reduced for them. When we look at for the baby, if it's a female baby, her chances of getting any of those cancers are reduced. Babies who are breastfed have lower chances of diabetes, chronic disease, things like that. What we're seeing is that since breastfeeding is the natural norm, then their test scores are higher, and it's for the children. The eye-hand coordination is usually better. Linguistically, they are more advanced. So, like, my son was born premature, and because he was intubated for so long, he had issues with speech. Breastfeeding actually put him ahead of the game. Had he not been intubated, he would have tested higher on many of his test scores. So what we see is that usually, because it's all of this going on with breastfeeding, children who breastfeed, they have a better speech patterns. They're able to grasp language a little bit better. The phonics and the physical aspects are a little bit easier for them. And then, like I said, the eye-hand coordination, the brain development is a little bit more intense. And then we look at the child's parent bonding is usually a little bit better. And when we go over it and we look at things like mother-child bonding in cases of abuse and things like that, which is a consideration for us in the African American community, we find moms who breastfeed longer that there's less incidences of child abuse, because not only does it change the mom's brain, but then it makes that connection a little bit better. So then when we look, and I know that you asked just for the mother and baby, but it's not just, it's never, the benefits are never just the mother and baby. So then when we look at for the father,
that was my next question.
when we look at the father, if we can get that brought in sooner with things like skin to skin, and making him more educated and aware of how breastfeeding benefits him, then we look at a father who has less incidences of postpartum depression. The postpartum depression in fathers is a real deal. And if you understand the Black male, the stress levels are very high after a baby is born, because now we have to provide. And in our community, being able to provide for this baby is huge. But if you're supporting and you don't have to worry about the nutritional aspect, then that's one less thing. Because then it's not like, oh my God, I have to feed this baby, clothe the baby, put a roof over the baby's head and all this kind of stuff. That's the one thing ticked off. So then we make him, again, we put him back in the protector provider role, which is very important to our men. But really what he's doing is he's supporting mom and baby to breastfeed. And then the benefits for the baby, the long term. And dads really, really find a lot of value in the fact of the brain development for their child. Another benefit for the dad is, again, you go back to those benefits to mom, the less chances of reproductive cancer, and that she's healthier, because long term, and that's the thing, because dads are fixers, they're strategic. If we know she has a less chance of leaving us to raise this baby by ourselves, then we have a certain level of peace, and then the stress is even less. Okay? So then, again, it eats into their ego as well, because they're like, well, I've helped with this, so then now I've helped her to be healthy. So that's another thing. So then you have the monetary aspect where we can pull dad away from being a wallet, and then he's more active. And dads who are supportive of breastfeeding, when we allow them to be supportive of breastfeeding, we find that they're more present. And then it makes a connection for mom and dad. Even if they're not together, say if they're separated and they're co-parenting, but if he's still supporting the breastfeeding aspect, the dyad between breastfeeding, then he has a better chance of staying and remaining present. That's what studies are showing. So breastfeeding actually has a lot of benefits. So then we look out into the greater community. For us in the Black community, then we have healthier babies, we have smarter babies, we have healthier moms, and we have families who have a sustainability that may not have been there in the past.
Oh, that's really important to know, because that was going to be my next question as far as how do fathers benefit from it. But you really covered a lot of really good points in that breastfeeding, as small as some people think it is, really goes a long way to unifying the family and actually somewhat sustaining and undergirding community. So even if the parents aren't together, they still have a vested interest in the nutrition of this child, and they both feel part of the raising, the rearing, and of that child, rather than one being off in a corner somewhere. And then I thought about this too. It goes along with the postpartum depression. Not only does the father, is he able to fend off postpartum depression, the mother is as well, because she's getting the support from a partner that may not necessarily be a romantic partner anymore, but is nonetheless a partner in raising the child, and they both have a vested interest.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's really
and
great.
There's also a chemical benefit to that, because moms who breastfeed, if breastfeeding is working well for them, then we do see lower incidences of postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. So it's another reason why we want to make sure that mom is supported with breastfeeding.
So you said something that's really good to know. I don't think a lot of us know these nuances, and I don't think a lot of us know that had we possibly, and once again, not doing any kind of feeding shaming, as you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier, but had some of us been breastfed when we were youth, some of the issues that happened in our lives, we probably would have dealt with a little differently and probably even better. Is that
Right.
a good way?
Absolutely.
So then tell me this. It, breastfeeding, I know in our community, in the Black community, we see a lot of youth that seem to be oversized. Does and I'm going out here for this one, but do you think that and unhealthy, do you think breastfeeding would help to alleviate some of that in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Breastfeeding is been linked to decreased levels of obesity, whereas formula has been directly linked to increased levels of obesity. Um, so then when you mix, the eating patterns and things like that, then it you see the linkage is there. So even with, and a lot of people criticize the African American community for our menus and our eating habits and things like that. So then when you look at lower income, right? So there's a different dynamic there. The feeding decisions may not be what we would ideally want, but we have to consider, they're working with what they have. So then when you introduce breastfeeding, some of those nutritional issues are resolved because the baby is getting breast milk. So even in a case where mom may not she may not have the best diet, okay, the baby is still receiving incredibly nutritious meals from the breast. And a prime example to think about, and this is one of the things that I always share with my family, is think about, in those countries where food insecurity is real. You see the baby with the extended stomach and the flies and all that kind of stuff, right? In those countries, the World Health Organization still recommends that moms breastfeed. Now, the food that mom is eating is not the most nutritious, but it's what she has at that point, but she's still encouraged to breastfeed and exclusively breastfeed. Something else to consider, while it is not allowed here and it's illegal here to breastfeed with a mom who knows that she is HIV positive, the World Health Organization does recommend breastfeeding. If a mom is positive for HIV, she is encouraged to breastfeed that baby exclusively, because the thing is, the key with that is that she needs to take her meds, and she's breastfeeding. The thing that we don't understand with formula is that in the cases of HIV/AIDS, is that when you introduce formula to baby, risk of contracting HIV/AIDS, it goes up 25%. Because we have to remember that formula is a contaminated substance. So we've had cases where babies have died from taking formula. And when you look into the history of formula, you'll see how this can happen. So that's just how powerful breast milk is. Breast milk right now is being used in studies for not only AIDS, but cancer, and a number of other studies. And then something else, when we look at our culture and our history, is that breast milk has been used, our elders have used breast milk for a number of things. If you talk to any grandmother, old grandmother, not one of these new grandmothers, but old grandmothers, she has used breast milk for size in the eyes, cold sores, toothache, ear infections, sinus infections. I use a little breast milk if my mom has nipple trauma, where there's a cut, a tear, something like that. You put a little breast milk on the tear. You can put nipple cream. I prefer the more natural route to use maybe extra virgin olive oil, or I prefer coconut oil. Put a breast pad over that, and you keep doing it every day. Keep that breast pad on for 24 hours, change it in a 24-hour cycle, and you'll see that tear or cut will probably most likely be gone within 2 to 3 days.
Wow. So breast milk really is kind of like a panacea of sorts. It
Yes.
really is a magical kind of, it's magic. I'm looking for a word that I can't seem to find, but yes, it is. Well, tell me this. So with breast milk being so beneficial to the mother, the father, and of course the baby, why, and I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, I want to delve a little deeper into this. Why does there appear to be so much breastfeeding shame in our society, especially in the Black community, since because it's cheaper, I would think, it's cheaper to provide, it's easier to provide, but there seems to be a lot of shame as well as miseducation. So that's kind of two questions in one. But can you elaborate on the shame of breastfeeding in our community and how we can fix that?
The first thing is others and their opinion. So as we know, parents across the board, they get a lot of criticism just across the board. Women specifically get a lot of criticism. We are forever being sexualized, and so that's one of the main things with breastfeeding. It's always overly sexualized, and because of that, it's always somehow offensive. And then the misconception of breast milk being a bodily fluid, which it is, it's a bodily fluid, but it is not the same as other bodily fluids. So when we just throw that out there as it being a bodily fluid, then we demonize it and we pathologize it. And that really hurts the breastfeeding movement. Again, we have to remember our biggest competitor is formula companies, and they have a lot of money. And in order for them to make money, they have to do something about breastfeeding. And they wouldn't be able to make this much money if breastfeeding had never been demonized. And there's a long history of breast milk being said that it's not enough, it's inappropriate, it's time consuming, it has all these negative things to it. And, but this formula, because formula, when you think of formula, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the perfect blend of these ingredients. That's how you get the formula. Go back to your algebra and think about this formula. It's just perfect. But then what they don't do is that they don't tell you about the things where it's not perfect. They don't tell you about the cases of where formula has been pulled from shelves because there were too many beetle parts in it. Not that there are beetle parts in it, but there were too many. So then when you look at African Americans especially, and this is one of the reasons why I say I have a focus on Black people who are descendants of U.S. slavery, is that, again, remember before we got here, breastfeeding wasn't an issue, it was something that we did. Once we got here, what do we know about breastfeeding? The main thing that we know is the thing of the wet nurse. Wet nurses have been around. Being a wet nurse actually is not a bad thing. It is not something that should be pathologized or horrible. Actually, from where we came from, it was our honor to be able to feed somebody else's baby. It's a part of shared nursing. If I was still breastfeeding and I had a friend and we were both breastfeeding, she could leave her baby with me and go handle business, and I would take care of her baby, including breastfeeding her baby. That's what shared nursing is. So then you have people who, that's what they would do. They would feed babies, because back then we didn't have pumps, we didn't have formula. So we had moms who were still breastfeeding, and they would take care of maybe a sick mom who couldn't breastfeed her baby. Or somehow she would provide milk for a mom who just couldn't do it. But what ended up happening is in slavery, we had to have wet nurses, not only because we needed to feed babies whose moms were out in the field, but then we also had to feed the master's kids. Why? Because breastfeeding provides a natural birth control, and she couldn't be infertile, because, again, just like as many slaves as we needed, so because that was property for the slave owner needed inheritors. So the wife needed to be able to get pregnant. She couldn't go through a natural lactose-induced infertility. So we had to have the slaves in there being able to feed her baby so she can have other babies. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, wow, I never knew this. I didn't know any of this.
Right. So then when you take away that portion, also what we don't talk about at all in the Black community is the fact that with all of the raping and abuse that was going on, We don't look at how we were treated when we had our baby. And again, then our natural instinct, our natural culture was that childbirth was a family event. We birthed at home, amongst our family. Nobody was put out of the room. It was a very, very regular. So, but when we had the shame of our babies may be taken from us, the babies may be stolen. Again, we don't know who the father is, so then we don't know who's coming for this baby. So then there's no time to breastfeed. And if your baby was sold from you right out of the womb, then what do you do with this milk that your body naturally makes? So, and you can't be out in the field if you are bent over because you didn't get the milk out and now you have a breast infection. So, and you can't do that because now you're seen as weak, you're subpar, your property that's not working, your cattle that is quote unquote lame, for the true essence of the word lame. So then what do they do with you? So that's where some of the depravity has come from. So then you move it to current day. I can't breastfeed because I need to get up and go to work. Nobody will watch my baby because in our community, breastfed babies are too needy. But when you go back and you look at our history, what is the neediness? A breastfed baby is going to cry because we need to suckle at the breast. So when the baby was put in the bush or underneath the porch because we couldn't bring the baby inside and the baby is just crying, that cries, what does that call? It calls predators. So insects, bugs, reptiles, things like that. Thus, if you haven't learned, if you didn't know the history about alligator bait, why did they use babies? Because babies cry. That's going to call attention. So that kind of stuff. So now, here today, we don't have, what do we say about babies who don't cry? Those are good babies. But if your baby cries too much, then your baby is bad. Your baby is spoiled. Your baby is needy, and we can't do that. So Aunt Betsy is not going to watch your baby because your baby, it cries too much. Because we've been conditioned that we can't hold the baby. I hold your baby for a hot minute when it benefits me, but I can't be here. I can't be troubled to sit here and hold your baby who has been rightfully conditioned to need physical touch. And so breastfeeding provides that. But we demonize it because then your baby is considered needy. And it's not so much needy, is that your baby has never been conditioned to be this quote unquote independent being 15 minutes after they're born. Because with breastfeeding and the way that we do it now is that as soon as the baby is born, we put the baby to the breast. And some of us in the lactation world, we believe in a zero separation policy. So the baby is always in somebody's arms, preferably with mom at the breast, dad within the first 2 hours, and then back to mom again. That's zero separation. But when we get home, we want this baby to be independent, be able to self-soothe, and we don't understand the long-term physical, biological, neurological effect that it has on the baby.
So considering all of that, what should someone who has a career or who has a regular job that they have to go to that's going to cause some separation between them and their child for a few hours a day, what should they do if they still want to breastfeed?
What we do, especially here in the U.S., we have several laws on the books where you can get your extended time if maternity leave. So if you can use that maternity leave, I say use it the best way you can. If all you get is maybe the 6 to 8 weeks, then I'm going to encourage you to sit at home and breastfeed your baby. Maternity leave, we have another thing. We think maternity leave is for us to take care of business, and that's not what it's for. I need you to, this is when I tell you, listen to the old people. Find you somewhere to sit down and feed your baby. That's it. I don't need you going to all these different places. But unfortunately, for some of our families, they have to in order for them to keep, their livelihood. So if you're a mom that's getting assistance, you have to go down to the county building within a certain time frame that your baby is born, because then you'll get cut off. So I need you to be able to wrap that baby up, put the baby on the breast, and do what you have to do. Now, once you're ready to go back to work, you've been released, then we need to have a conversation and we need to put you on a pumping schedule. And then I need you to make sure that you can get a provider, whoever's going to watch your baby, that respects the fact that your baby has never been left alone. So that means, unfortunately, some of our daycare providers probably will peak. They're going to have babies that are only formula fed. But at no time should a daycare provider say, I won't watch your baby if your baby is breastfed. That's a daycare provider that needs to be reported. If it's going to be Aunt Betsy, if it's going to be Granny, or what I've seen sometimes is mom and dad, they tag team. Somebody changes their schedule. Dad is either the one that's working night so he can be at home with the baby during the daytime, and that's what they do. So we have to do what we need to do. If you are one of those people where your job will allow you to bring your baby, or if you have daycare on the premises, then by all means use it. Go down on your break and you feed your baby and then you come back. You're still going to pump, but you do that. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. For some, unfortunately, they don't have some of the liberties that other people have, but we can work around some of that stuff. And this goes back to if we can give ourselves what we need. So with the education, if we can educate our elders and say, these are the benefits, this is a benefit for you, and then it's not that hard. Breast milk is really easy to deal with. It's not as bad as formula. And when I say it's not as bad, it doesn't smell. The baby doesn't smell as much. It doesn't stain. If we know how much to give the baby and follow the baby's cues, we're not wasting milk. For the grandmother who feels like, oh, well, I need to have a certain amount of milk because this baby gets hungry, then we work with mom on her pumping and how to get her pumping output out. So that's why we need the time beforehand. So I always encourage moms, if you can take some of the extended leave, then take it so then we can build up your milk. And then we do what we need to do. And then if we have to, unfortunately, if formula has to come into play, then we need to educate on how we can do both. There's never a time where it needs to be just one or the other if there's not a medical reason. We can always do both, and then the baby still receives, good nutrition, and then, we have to give formula. And we may not always have to do that. We may have to do it just for a short period of time. But even with that, when the pumping output looks like it's not as much as it was the day before, there's usually a reason, and that's one of the reasons why I follow mom so closely during this time, is that sometimes the feeding milestones can cause mom to believe she doesn't have enough milk. And during this time, it does make pumping a bit difficult. So we just need to have that education, and there's some things that we can do to kind of tweak it to see if we can get a little bit more output. And then we need to work with whoever's watching the baby to make sure that they're not overfeeding the baby, milk isn't being wasted and that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's very good, Lydia. Then before we move on to just some information about your services, I have a few more anatomical questions that I'm sure is often burning in the heads of future mothers or current mothers. And I'm going to throw a couple of them out there for you, and then I'm going to just give you the floor for you to answer. I know some women sometimes think that their breasts are too small to breastfeed. I know that I've commonly heard that women would say that they don't make enough milk. I've also heard women say that breastfeeding lowers their libido and therefore creates, friction between them and their partner. Can you address some of the common anatomical concerns that women have so that they could be more comfortable with this natural process?
Right. Breast size really does not play a role in how much milk a mom makes. It's actually the inside of the breast that will tell you how much a mom makes, how much milk mom makes. So some women who have smaller breasts, because they're not as full as maybe a bigger woman who has full breasts, because she has more space in her breast, then that means her capacity to hold milk may be more. So I have small breasts, so I won't make a lot of milk. It's actually kind of the flip. So a mom who has larger breasts or fuller breasts, because her breasts are full, she may not have that available space So then what we end up seeing is the mom who has a bigger capacity, her baby may be able to go longer periods without feeding. The mom who has less space, then her baby may need to eat more frequently. Again, just looking at the breast, there's no way for us to tell. And I will say, when I said smaller versus larger, that's not necessarily true, because some women who have smaller breasts have fuller breasts, and then some women who have larger breasts, they are just longer breasts, and there may not be full. So then, it flips back and forth. We would actually need to go inside and look at the breast. Now, concerns about milk supply is very common. One of the things that people don't understand about babies is that babies go through what we call our growth spurts, and they go through them almost weekly for the first 8 weeks. Then there are monthly and quarterly after that. So what they look like is the baby is very, very hungry. The baby will eat every hour, multiple times an hour, or have very long feedings. When I say long feedings, I've seen babies go from 45 minutes straight feeding up to 3 hours. So sometimes babies will feed straight through the night, nonstop, just continual sucking. So with that, then you'll see maybe a fussy baby. Starting about maybe week 2, you may see a baby who may not be pooping as much, or they may have no poop, but still a lot of wet diapers. And then you'll see maybe, and there might be some gas in there as well. For mom, if she's exclusively breastfeeding, only giving breast, nothing else, she's going to be tired, sleepy, thirsty, hungry. Starting about week 3 is where she'll start to get appetite again. And then her breasts over that time will be they'll get very soft. Maybe about a week, 5 days in, then they'll get kind of full. They shouldn't be hard, but you'll probably see some hard spots, some tenderness like you would see when you're PMSing. And then that cycle starts all over again at the next growth spurt. So remember, I said for the first 8 weeks, that happens almost every week. So day 4 to day 10, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. That's almost every week. And you get a little break, and usually moms pay no attention to the break. And then from there, they become quarterly or monthly. So you get a little break at 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, and then 15 months. And after that, I don't count them anymore. I have a 21-year-old. Trust me, they still go through the growth spurt. So to bring it home and make it more understandable, let's look at that for a non-breastfed baby who's a little bit older. So I know you have a little niece, right?
A couple of them now.
So, right. And so now she's not at the breast, she's in the refrigerator. So for her, what you're going to see is now she's going to probably start eating. She's going to clean her plate, and then she's going to ask for more food, okay? You may see a little sassiness. Mommy's not cooking the food fast enough. You may see a little tantrum. She's probably going to start fighting in her sleep. She's getting in trouble because she won't go to sleep. Or you're going to look up and she just fell asleep in front of the TV, or she just went down her bed and she's like, I'm tired. You may see a baby who starts to be a little fussy about using the bathroom, complains about tummy issues. And then while you're looking at her pants are starting to flood, okay? So that's when we start cracking on her and be like, girl, your pants is flooding. But then for mom and dad, they may notice where they used to go grocery shopping every 2 weeks, maybe they need to go like every week, week and a half. By the end of that week, or by the end of that growth spurt period, those pants no longer fit because now the tummy is grown and she's gotten a little chubby. Okay. Something else to look at during this time is sometimes doctors and elders, they will confuse this with colic because the baby, remember I said fussiness. So the fussiness can happen at nighttime, sometimes it's in the daytime, but the baby is just continually hungry. But if you have a mom who's listening to an elder and saying, put this 2-week-old on a feeding schedule, we can't do that because the baby is going to continually eat. And if you're not keeping the baby to the breast, then you're going to see a real fussy baby. And then sometimes because of the tummy things that's going on, you're going to see a fussy baby. So the fussiness is going to add to the fussiness because with crying, they're swallowing air. When they're feeding like they're feeding, they're gulping. So that's more air in the tummy. So then the air in the tummy is making the baby uncomfortable. So then we get fussy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how that can be seen as colic. And then with the continual feeding, like you'll feed the baby maybe about 15 minutes, and then you try to put the baby down, or the baby looks like they're sleeping, they're really not in a deep sleep, and then 5 minutes later the baby is up and wanting to eat again. What happened is we decided to end the feed. The baby hadn't finished eating. Just because the baby closed their eyes does not mean that they're done. And we need to learn the baby cues and their feeding signals. So if we don't do that, then we won't understand that it's not that mom doesn't have enough milk. It's we put the baby down too soon and the baby didn't finish eating.
Mm.
I'll give you this last thing as far as the I think I don't have any milk or I don't have enough milk. We just had Thanksgiving. We done went over Granny's house, and Granny done made all of our good food, all our favorites. We had some greens, some ham, some turkey, some dressing, macaroni and cheese.
Yes.
And she put that food on our plate, and she put it in front of us, and she said, "Precious, you got 5 minutes." And I'm paying Granny no attention because you like, I'm gonna eat this food, right? So at 4 minutes and 45 seconds, Granny hits that door and is reaching for your plate. You like, no. She takes your plate, dumps it in the trash. Kitchen is closed. You get nothing now. Who wants to beat Granny?
But you know what I get from that? What I get from that is we as adults enjoy having our meals in a more social setting, socializing. So the baby wants to do the same thing with mommy. Socialize over a meal.
Right. At the same time, though, what happens is and then we're done. We eat, we pause, we savor the food, we take a drink, we have a little conversation, we let it digest, and then we go back and we eat some more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the baby does. We can't expect the baby just to and be done and satisfied. That's not how it works. We have to give that baby time. And then remember, the baby is new to this. So very early on, the baby is like, okay, let me manage my brain, my heart, my breathing, and then I'm doing something new. I have to suckle for nutrition. I need to swallow for nutrition, and then I need to let my body digest, absorb, and then eliminate. And that's something that the baby didn't do for the 9 months that we were pregnant. And then if you have a preemie, the baby really was not, because now we're working with maybe an undeveloped digestive system. And so you want us to be able to do all this on a timer? It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important to know. I'm really getting that breastfeeding is a mommy and me experience. Uh-oh, we have a little bit of, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like breastfeeding is a really mommy and me experience, and it's an intimate moment between the mother and the child, and we're trying to systemize it. We're trying to make it regimented when it's really just a time for you and your child to connect, and for you to not only provide their nutritional needs, but for them to also, help you, and you also to provide for them, the emotional support that you both need. So
Right.
Here's a question that is often asked: how long? Because we've all seen those women with them kids that look like they're about 9 years old, with the feet dragging in the stroller, right? And you notice that the mother is still breastfeeding. What is an ideal age? Because, we got this misconception in the Black community. Once our kids turn 18, we try and put them out. We were just talking about that the other night. And that's not necessarily how it should be, because they may not be ready. And that is what society has put on us and not what's correct. But when we have babies, what is the ideal length of time that a child should be breastfed?
Well, you hate me for this one. Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics and gynecology and all those folks here in the U.S., we say we want the baby to be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months. At 6 months, we're introducing solids, and we would like to see mom and baby continue until at least a year, and then after that, it is mom and baby's decision when to stop. The World Health Organization wants baby to be breastfed for at least 2 years, and then at that time, it is mom and baby's decision when to stop.
Now, the biological norm for breastfeeding to stop is 5 years old. At that time, it's when the jaws fuse and the baby will most likely lose their suckle. And at that time, human babies don't no longer process lactose. So we don't need milk going forward after 5 years old. Okay. Now, worldwide, the average is anywhere between 5 and 7, and that is taking into consideration those areas that have poor water supply and food insecurity. So, bringing that back here, if I can get somebody to breastfeed past 2 weeks, girl, I'm so excited, I don't know what to do. And that's bad because we should be breastfeeding a lot longer. If you work through a program like WIC or anything like that, we encourage moms to breastfeed for this first year. We'll give you a milestone of 6 months because at that time you start to receive solids. But we would like for mom to breastfeed for the first year minimum. One of the things that we have to remember, especially for us in the Black community, is because we've been pushed to separate from our kids so much, is that then we make them adults quicker. And if we stop and you look at a 1-year-old, that's still very much a baby. A 2-year-old is still very much a baby. Now, I know our issues is because we feel like people, how they handle breastfeeding at those older ages. And some of it is a cultural thing. And for us in our community, I always teach my moms that you make breastfeeding what you want it to be. So, one, breastfeeding provides a prime opportunity to teach your baby boundaries, respect, and how to have autonomy for themselves and to respect another person's autonomy. And I'm talking about body autonomy. So all of that pulling at mom's shirt, mom plays a large role in that. Because if we ignore our baby when our baby is asking, then the baby is going to go into stress, and this is what you start to see. So if mom was attentive and responded to the baby's request, we would have less chances of seeing this. Now, of course, we have to leave room for personal, for the baby's personality, but at the same time, mom and the extended family have a role to play. So if, say we have one of our teen moms, and she's breastfeeding and the baby gets to a certain age and she's on the phone and she's like, da, 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 but the baby is like, I want breast. We need to tap her on the shoulder and say, you need to feed your baby. Point blank. I tell moms all the time, when your baby is asking for breast, then go ahead and feed the baby. Now, I'll say this. Say you have a 4-year-old and the baby is like, I want something to drink. And they're tapping you. You're not responding. You're teaching your baby to ignore you and to be disrespectful. So then when we see older babies who are breastfed and we're not paying them any attention and they're pulling at mom's clothing, I always say, instead of demonizing breastfeeding, look at how mom is ignoring the baby. There's a difference with that. So I don't think we in our community would have such an issue with breastfeeding, extended breastfeeding. That's what it's called when it's older babies. I don't think we would have such an issue if it wasn't what we would consider inappropriate. If there was some respect where the baby was heard and then the response was there. And I always explain to people when they use this as a reason for not wanting to breastfeed at all, is that what you see during the first 2 weeks of breastfeeding is not what you're going to see at a year or what you're going to see at 2 years. You're not even going to see that at 9 months. It's going to look totally different. But we do play a role. And so some of our cultural and personalities we need to put in check. And while we may not feel like we need to give the baby that much, I would say consider that you're teaching your child how to respond, respect, and to be able to honor autonomy. And so you're teaching your baby how to honor their own body autonomy at the same time. Because if I'm hungry and I'm telling you I'm hungry and you're not listening to me, then what messages are you giving me?
Exactly. And It is a cultural thing because, you know, in the Black community, we're like, oh, you're not about to disrespect me. Oh, you're not about to put me out here on Front Street. Oh, you're going to do it when I say you're going to do it. And that is an area where we have to learn to be more softer and gentler and more intuitive and willing to listen to our kids. That's an area where they're not trying to run us. They're just hungry.
That's it. And I think we have that hard time because we can't. But again, look back at our history and why we would think that. Right. It's not that. I mean, because we have things that we say, oh, that baby is crying a lie. And baby says he wants the milk, but they don't really want to milk. They want to be picked up. And so when you go back and you think about what I said about sometimes we'll feed the baby, put the baby down. The baby wasn't truly sleeping. He wasn't in a deep enough sleep. So then when he wakes right back up and wants to eat again, and then you put the baby to the breast and then the baby goes right back to sleep. It wasn't that they lied. It was at that age, the baby only knows how to suckle to put themselves to sleep. They don't know how to self-soothe. So now you put the baby, they're alone. They don't want to be alone, so they're going to cry. How you're going to keep them is you're going to put them to the breast, and then they're tired. They fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. So much of what you said, Lydia, has just been a real eye-opener for me. And it has really given me a totally different outlook on breastfeeding. I've always been a fan and a proponent of breastfeeding, but there's something about having more so insider knowledge and the tools to equip yourself that really blows your perspective out of the water and expands your horizons. So thank you for that, because I'm sure if I'm getting this knowledge and information and this treat, this blessing today, I'm sure all of our viewers are going to get it as well. Now, I don't want to keep you for that much longer, but I do want to talk about your services and what you do and how you are of benefit to the community. And then I also want to find out how any mothers who are watching this video, or fathers, excuse me, I don't want to exclude the fathers, how they're able to connect with you. So give us some information on the services that you provide and why they're necessary, and then we'll talk about how to get connected with you.
Okay, so like I said, I do prenatal education. So for a family who is considering breastfeeding, if you are not being touched by another agency or anything like that, and you want support, you want to be educated, you want to know what are your options, then we definitely can meet. I do virtual support. I do in-person support. So you would just contact me and let me know which you would prefer. I can do a telephone call. I can do a webinar type thing, and I can actually come and meet you in your home, and we can sit down and we can discuss your breastfeeding goals and your concerns, and maybe I can give you some more insight on breastfeeding. Once you have the baby, I can do those same things. I am offering right now a virtual support that includes text messages and emails, and then the option to be able to video chat with me when needed. So you can find me at, you can find me all over social media at Lydia O Boyd, CLE. I have a website and you can find my resource listing that details all of my services, and it's at bit.ly Lydia's Resources, all lowercase, Lydia's Resources, bit.ly/Lydia's Resources. You can email me at lydiaoboyd@gmail.com. Okay, so I am going to be doing home visits as well. So if you contact me and you want to set up to schedule, maybe you're coming home and you feel like you need some support, you can set that up. We can schedule it. If you know when you're going to have your baby and you feel like you just need some extra support, I can come and see you, or I can wait until you're discharged and then I can come and see you. So those are also things. Now, for those of you who have extended family and you want to make this a family thing, then what we can do is we can have a larger meeting. We can do a support group style meeting for maybe you and your girlfriends. If you want to get a couple couples together, maybe you want to get 3-4 couples together and you want to do it that way, we can do that, so we can bring the dads and the moms together. I am open. So I do have I have a variety of packages available to families. So, and then if her mom, if it's just her by herself and she would like to have a one-on-one, like I said, we can schedule a call and we can chit chat.
Okay. And so everybody, I am going to include all of Lydia's contact information and resources, not only at the end of this video, but I'm also going to put them in the box below here on YouTube. And I know you didn't mention this, but you also have an Instagram, so I'll include that. And then I know you have a blog called The Literary Genius. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. So she also has a blog speaking about breastfeeding and those and additional information, forgive me. So I'm going to make sure that I include all of that. And so before I let Lydia go, I just really want to implore everyone that is listening that breastfeeding is something that is very beneficial. It's an art. It is also a great benefit to our community and to our children. And so it's something that you really want to, if you have the ability to consider. You know, some of us, there are some mothers that are not going to be able to do it because they have work schedules or other concerns that won't allow them to do it, but we're not shaming mothers if they choose formula or breastfeeding.
Absolutely.
But Lydia provides a service where she is encouraging and providing support to mothers and families who would like the option of breastfeeding and want to do it right and want to get the benefits for both the baby and themselves in the process. So I really, really encourage you guys to tap into her resources, converse with her. I know, Lydia, you're here in the Southern California area, but so for in-home visits or in-person visits, she may not be able to provide those services for you, but she, like she said, she does do virtual visits as well. And it's just really good to have someone else in your corner when you are bringing a new life into the world, because your life changes. So, Lydia, I appreciate you. I love you so much, Madam President. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, just I have my own personal branding that I do for my families. And so for my families, I call them awesome moms and awesome dads. And while I understand that we have a lot of negative messaging, I want all of our parents to know that you are awesome and that you are birthing genius. So when we look back at our ancestors looked at our babies as incoming genius that would bless our community. And that's how I see you. And so I am honored for every family that allows me to journey with them so that they can feed into the blessed community that we have with your genius baby. And so thank you so much, Kamika. I really appreciate this. And everyone, really, if you can, if you're not breastfeeding yourself, then always consider that this is a great gift to give. It's a great baby shower gift to give. And as an elder, it does not take away from your eldership if you provide this kind of support for your loved one. You are part of the village, and I'm just here as part of the village as well.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Lydia. Thank you so much for your time, and we will talk again soon.
Okay, bye-bye. Amen. Bye-bye.
Come on, talk to me. You can see what's going on.